This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hindsight is always 2020 when things go wrong, but rarely do we use that 2020 hindsight to give people credit when things go the right way. Case in point, when DTR went out there and started a game and looked bad against Baltimore, there was no shortage of people willing to tell you how clear it was in hindsight that they shouldn't have traded Josh Dobbs, this and that. But again, hindsight is 2020. And it goes both ways. If you're going to give the Browns flack for something in hindsight, well, you might want to give them credit for something. And even I think that the whole Josh Dobbs thing is a bit overblown. I think people were overrating Josh Dobbs in that moment and kind of underestimating the situation that whatever the quarterback would have been in that game would have been in, and how unfavorable of a situation that was going to be for whoever played quarterback for the Cleveland Browns on that game, whether it would have been of Josh Dobbs, DTR, PJ Walker, or even somebody like Jacoby Brissett. And honestly, Jacoby's probably the only guy I would go, yeah, maybe that would have made a difference. If they traded Jacoby Brissett for a 5th round pick, I would understand where you're coming from, because Jacoby has experience. He's played a ton of games. He started a ton of games. Yeah, that's a difference. The Josh Dobbs things never made sense to me, because, you know, it's all projection at that point, because we really don't even know what Josh Dobbs is. He had a couple of good games with the Cardinals, but like, that's also a team that people are underestimating right now. So that kind of happens when you're in that situation. But nonetheless, hindsight was 2020 that week and throughout the bye week, right? Everybody was Mr. Hindsight. But there are some things that you can look at in hindsight that look pretty good. And a lot of these things are things that I talked about on this channel that I felt like would make a big difference. What are those 3 things? We'll get in depth on each topic, but trading for Dustin Hopkins, y'all know I was big on that. Getting more veteran players. Y'all know I was big on that all offseason. And getting more veteran coaches. One of the first things I suggested that this team do at the end of last season was, hey, you got to get more veteran coaches, got to get a former player coach, and you got to get more veteran players in this locker room, because it feels like there's a maturity issue with the whole of the locker room, with everybody being so young. So those are the 3 things that I feel like have made a difference. Let's start by talking about the kicker. I think a lot of people understand this, but I don't think we understand the severity of it. Cade York being on this team could easily mean that this team is 1-4. I'm not joking. Like, Cade York being on this team could easily mean that they are 1-4. Why do I say that? Yes, the Cincinnati game had a nice margin in point differential, but we forget how many field goals made up that margin in point differential, and how those field goals kind of closed the game out for the Cleveland Browns to the point where the Bengals couldn't compete anymore. So yes, you do win that game by a lofty margin, but if you don't have a consistent field goal kicker, and let's say 1 or 2 of those field goals goes left or right because Cade York was on that type of energy in the preseason, then that game could roll out a completely different way. Maybe Joe Burrow finds a way to get a couple good drives in there and the Browns offense can't answer, or they keep missing field goals. Getting Dustin Hopkins really helped you secure that victory versus Cincinnati. Week 2 doesn't really make much of a difference. I think maybe the game's not as close because you don't have a good kicker, but whatever. Week 3, I don't think it makes much of a difference in week 3, but week 4, it don't make much of a difference in week 4, but week 5, it does. Those are 2 of your biggest wins, 2 of your most impressive wins. If you're the Cleveland Browns, you can say Dustin Hopkins had a ton to do with that. Cincinnati and San Francisco. If you don't trade for him if you don't pull the plug on Cade York. And look, it took a lot to get to that point. I'm not gonna forget that, right? It took a lot more than it would have taken me to get to that point with Cade York. But he got to that point, and to the front office's credit, they decided to stop playing games with that position. They didn't try to get a young guy. They didn't try to, take a flyer on somebody. They didn't try to compete with him and put him on the practice. They said, we're trading for Dustin Hopkins. We're getting a veteran kicker. We're done with this. We're getting a veteran kicker. And I'm glad that they finally went along that route. If you have listened to me for any period of time, you know where I stand on the evaluation of kickers. Now, I think when I first rolled this take out a couple years ago, I wasn't rolling it out right because people just kind of put this stamp on me as guy who hates kickers or guy who thinks that you shouldn't even have a kicker on the roster. No, that's never what my point was. My point was always, we draft kickers in the draft as if we know what a good kicker is going to be. It's always a mistake. 9 times out of 10, it's a mistake. I think of NFL teams, one team has a kicker not on their rookie contract that they drafted. I think it's Mason Crosby, if he's still there in Green Bay, and I don't even know if he is. So that was the one guy, though, for a very long time. He was the one guy that a team drafted and got to that second contract. Because while a kicker might get drafted, I think Tyler Bass might also fit that bill now. So Tyler Bass too. So while a kicker might be good that gets drafted, right? While that might be true, kickers have growing pains. And this is not a position that, one, you have the roster flexibility to have a kicker that you draft in the 3rd round sit for a couple years before he gets out there. And it's not one where you feel like that's going to change anything for what the situation is. Kickers are just going to suck when they first get into the league. They're going to have growing pains. Most of them are going to have to figure this thing out. They're going to have to make mistakes. And then what you end up doing when you draft a kicker is beta testing a kicker for somebody else to have success with. That's all you end up doing when you draft the kicker. It's a terrible idea. It should stop being encouraged. If your team does it, it should immediately be discouraged. Stop listening to these people like, oh, let it wait out. This guy's young, this and that. We got to let him develop. It's a kicker. Just get one who can do it. You got to play the numbers. You got to play the numbers with kickers. You can't put all your eggs in one 3rd round pick to say that's going to fix the kicker position. That's goofy. That's silly. Look at the best kickers. They're all undrafted. Look at how these kickers were found. It's because they did a casting call of kickers and just kept the one that didn't miss the most. That's how you find them. I know it sounds unpleasant. I know it sounds not nice. And I know that some of y'all emphasize with kickers a ton, but I'm just here to tell you, that don't matter. Stop drafting them. It's stupid to draft them. It is really dumb to draft kickers. It barely works out. And whoever does it, look, it happens every other year that somebody does it, and everybody thinks that they're gonna be the genius that figures out that they can draft the kicker and be set for 20. How many times do you hear people say, oh man, why not draft the kicker and be set for the next 20 years? Because the probability of you drafting a kicker and being set for the next 20 years at any point in the draft is the same as you drafting a quarterback in the 6th round and having a quarterback for the next. It is almost non-existent. But yet we talk about it as if it's like drafting a left tackle, like as if it's one of the most sure bets in the draft. It is so goofy to me how we talk about this. Where it's like, hey, you draft the kicker, you be set for 10 years. Oh, no, you won't. You'll probably hate that guy in 2. That's usually what happens when you draft the kicker. But nobody wanted to listen to me when the Browns were drafting kicker at the kicker. Nobody wanted to listen to me when we was drafting Alex Seibert and Cade York. But hopefully now people will listen to me when I say this. Look at me. If you were a fan that liked this, look at me eye to eye. After this week, no more talking about drafting a kicker. Stop it. No more. I don't want to hear that. No more. Okay? Look, Browns fans especially, because we've drafted 3 of these bums and they haven't turned out to nothing for us. Okay, we drafted Zane Gonzalez, didn't work out, had to get rid of him in 2 years. Drafted Austin Seibert, didn't work out, had to get rid of him in 2 years. And you drafted Cade York, didn't work out, had to get rid of him in a year and a half. Okay, no more. No more. Look at me, Browns fans. No more. We're no longer justifying drafting kickers. We're no longer enabling drafting kickers. We're no longer waiting and see what happens if you draft. No more. We've seen enough. We know what's up. We have no reason to think that this is a good idea. No more drafting kickers. The other thing I want to talk about is getting veteran players. The Browns added some veteran players to some key spots. Defensive tackle was one that I was like, they desperately need some vets. And they added some good vets. I think Maurice Hurst has been a good veteran to add to the team. I think that Dalvin Tomlinson has been a good veteran to add to the team. And I think Zadarius Smith has been an excellent veteran to add to the team. Look, Myles Garrett he's in like his 6th or 7th year. He's a vet too. But the problem with Myles Garrett being your veteran is that nobody who's born with regular football NFL ability looks at Myles as if that's something aspirational for them. Okay, like that Myles Garrett is so far beyond what you would expect from a normal football player on the defensive line that he's impossible to be aspirational, right? It's like if Brock Lesnar walked in here and told me all I need to do to get like him is to lift weights. Sir, you are 6'6". I'm not growing that much. I'm not about to be 6'6". Like you were born with some of that, right? Like some people could be very aspirational because they got their goals. They got these achievements through very humble beginnings. And that's usually people you find aspirational. A dude like Myles Garrett is about as aspirational as somebody who was born with $2 billion in the bank account, who got $3 billion when they turned 30. Yes, did they make $1 billion? Sure, cool. But like, hey, you're not about to do what they did. That's not aspirational. Anyways, I digress. Getting some veteran players on here was really important for some of your young guys. And I think you're seeing it in Jordan Elliott and Alex Wright, especially because those are guys who can be aspirational and very helpful to guys like Alex Wright, to guys like Jordan Elliott. Because before that, you had no vets in the defensive tackle room since you got rid of Sheldon Richardson. And you had nobody who can kind of show these guys the way. But Zadarius Smith is somebody who came from humble beginnings, wasn't the main guy coming out of Kentucky. It was Bud Dupree, but he made himself into a top tier edge rusher. And Alex Wright can look at that and go, oh, he got the path, right? Because when Myles out here telling him to do something, he can't do none of that Myles can do because Myles is Myles. But Zadarius is out here like, nah, man, I was limited like you, but here's how you can get around that. This is what I do. This is how I stay on top. This is how I get my edge. Look, I wasn't that high of a draft pick. And Alex Wright can look at that and go, oh, yeah, I can. And all of a sudden you see Alex Wright play much better. You get Jordan Elliott around a dude like Mo Hurst and Dalvin Tomlinson, and he starts to think, oh, yeah, like, okay, I can make some of this stuff happen. Okay, this is what I need to do to be a professional. This is what I need to do to make sure that I can play well with my 16 snaps that I get a game. This is how I can, and the mode gets there. Veteran players are important. Look how important Anthony Walker has been to the development of Sione Takitaki and JOK. Having a vet there that one is going to be where he's supposed to be, but two can help these guys find their ways as professionals is very important. They added veteran player after veteran player on this defense, and it's paying off because this defense doesn't do the same stuff that they did even in 2021 when they were pretty good. They used to have these moments where they would fall asleep, where they would just like get caught with their mind somewhere else other than the game, and then teams will come back on them. You notice that this defense is always focused, maybe have a bad drive or two every once in a while, but after that, they tighten back up and they get back out there and they play with a level of focus and consistent intensity that tells you that this is a much different story than any other Browns defense that we've seen in a very long time. It's because they got those veteran players in the right place and they picked the right veterans. Shout out to Andrew Berry. And this is a lot of shouting out to Andrew Berry in this video. Also getting veteran coaches. One of my biggest criticisms of Kevin Stefanski last year was that you just did not have enough experience on the coaching staff. And for a head coach who does not have the most experience in the world like Kevin Stefanski, you need to surround yourself with some experience. And to his credit, he did that. He got an experienced coach in Jim Schwartz, and then he also added a former player in Bubba Ventrone into the senior leadership of the coaching staff. The reason I thought that those two things were important, the former player thing was important because you need somebody who can take the gauge of the locker room, who can come back and say, hey, Kev, I understand this is how you operate, but as a former guy in the locker room, and look, I know this Stump used to play in the NFL, but like he played way back in the day. Bubba Ventrone played in like 2014. So it's a little bit different. The experience is a little bit more relevant. But you have a former coach former player who's now a coach that is in all the important meetings in Bubba Ventrone who can say, hey, Kev, I understand that this is how you kind of operate, but it could come off like this in the locker room. So, let us know that it's not that. By doing this or that. Or, hey, make sure that you're doing this. Or, hey, they can't communicate with this and that. And it just helps you in the long term manage a locker room and have better vibes in the locker room when you have a former player and senior leadership. Because now Kevin can be like, oh, I didn't know I didn't know that's how that was coming off. I didn't know that guys weren't happy with this and that. And you can better operate this whole situation. And I think that the locker room's been better for that. You haven't seen anybody be upset with their role or anything like that. It's just been a better environment. And I think Kevin has made some adjustments to how he handles that aspect of his coaching. And I think you can see it pay off because he seems much more well-liked. The buy-in seems much better from this locker room. And they just seem like a more resilient bunch, which would suggest that this is a closer bunch. But that's all that having that former player does to help you. Having a veteran coach also helps you, especially when it comes to making adjustments. Because if I have to adjust to something I've never seen before, I'm guessing. If I have to adjust to something that I've kind of seen before, I'm making a hypothesis. And the difference between a guess and a hypothesis is wildly different. Okay. And that's what Jim Schwartz brings to the table. When they huddle up or they talk about whatever's going on offensively, defensively during the game, Jim Schwartz goes, oh, I used to do that in Detroit to offensive coordinators. And you know what? It did bug me when they would add this wrinkle in to adjust to that. So that's what I would suggest doing. Or you can say, when you have that more experience there, okay, this is what happened in this time, or that might be this, or this might be that. Just having that experience on that coaching staff, very important. I think you've seen that make a difference too for this team because the decision making has been better. But those are the things that I think have been unsung about this Cleveland Browns team so far this year. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. You have a great day. Have a good night.